All right, so you've sent us a bunch of stuff about India's POSH Act, all these articles and legal documents.
Yeah.
And we're going to, dive into it today.
Love it.
So whether you're like prepping for some big meeting or just super curious about this thing, we're going to figure out what it is, why it matters.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe we'll even find some surprises along the way.
I love finding surprises.
Right.
Yeah, so the POSH Act, and that's POSH, the Prevention of Sexual Harassment at the Workplace Act. I think what's so interesting about it is that it's not just this vague idea of like, oh, we want safe workplaces. It's literally the law.
Yeah.
It lays down the law about a woman's right to a workplace that is free from harassment.
Yeah, it's official.
Exactly.
It's not just like, a suggestion.
Yeah.
This is like on the books.
Yeah, this is serious stuff. And, it's been around for a little bit now, right? It came into effect in 2013.
That's right, 2013. Okay, so it's been a minute.
Yeah, 2013 was big for workplace rights in India. But it's interesting because the POSH Act, it didn't just appear out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Remember everyone talking about the Vishaka guidelines?
Vaguely.
Okay, so back in 97,
97.
there was a big Supreme Court ruling. This was the Vishaka case.
Mm-hmm.
And this ruling, it really laid the foundation for what would eventually become the POSH Act. Because what it did was it said, hey, workplaces, you have a responsibility to make sure that you are protecting women from harassment.
Okay, so this was like the groundwork.
It was the groundwork,
Yeah.
like the very beginnings. And then they said, okay, let's codify this, let's make it law, and that's where the POSH Act came in.
Got it. So it took those guidelines and made them official,
Exactly.
the law of the land.
Exactly. It gave them teeth.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think when we talk about the impact of this act, one of the most significant things is it doesn't just say harassment is bad. It sets up this whole system for
Right.
reporting and redressal. Like, how do you actually make things right?
Right. Because the thing, you could say a lot of stuff on paper.
Oh, absolutely.
But if there's no process, if there's no way to actually address it if something happens,
Exactly.
it's kind of meaningless, right?
It's meaningless.
So walk me through this. Okay, so say someone's listening, they experience something at work, they're like, this is not okay, this is harassment. What happens? What's the process?
So that's where this whole making things right system comes in. The POSH Act says if you have 10 or more employees, your workplace, it must have what's called an internal complaints committee, or
Okay.
ICC.
ICC, got it.
And this committee, their whole job is to receive and investigate complaints of sexual harassment.
Okay, so it's not just like going to HR.
No.
It's this whole formal committee setup.
Formal committee.
Wow.
And they have, this is where it gets really interesting,
Okay.
they have the power of a civil court during investigations.
Whoa, wait, civil court power. Like they can actually
Yeah, they've got some authority.
they can actually make decisions and stuff.
Yeah, so it's serious.
That's huge.
Now, they can't issue punishments in the legal sense, like a court would,
Right.
but they can recommend actions to the employer.
Okay.
And these actions can be anything from you need to issue a formal apology
Okay.
to we recommend you terminate this person's employment.
Wow, so it's a pretty wide range
It's a big range.
of what they can do.
Yeah, so they have serious sway in how these situations are dealt with.
This ICC sounds like a pretty big deal.
Oh, it is.
Like it's not just some afterthought.
Yeah, no.
This is serious stuff.
And the act is very, very specific about how this committee needs to be structured because they want to make sure that it's fair, that there's expertise.
Right, because you can't just have a random group of people, right?
Exactly.
So who are these people on the committee? How do they make sure it's fair?
Great question. And that gets right to why it's designed the way it is. It can't just be anybody, right? You need representation. You need perspective. So the act says, first of all, it has to be led by a woman who's employed at a senior level in that workplace.
Okay, so someone who is in a position of authority
Exactly.
within the organization.
Yes.
Got it.
Someone who has a good understanding of the workplace, potentially.
Right, absolutely.
But then you need at least 2 other members from within the organization.
Okay, so it's not all internal, though.
Well, those 2 are internal.
Okay.
And ideally, they have some background or interest in women's issues, social work, legal knowledge, something like that. But here's the big thing.
Okay.
1 member has to be from outside the organization completely
Oh, interesting.
to avoid bias, to bring in outside expertise.
So someone with no dog in the fight, so to speak.
Exactly.
Just there to be like, all right, is this,
Objective voice.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. Okay.
So that could be someone from an NGO,
Okay.
a women's rights group, maybe a lawyer who specializes in these cases.
Got it.
Someone with a really deep understanding of sexual harassment issues
Right.
and everything surrounding that.
Okay, so it's like they're really trying to make this committee as,
As balanced as possible.
balanced and as fair and impartial as possible.
Exactly.
Which makes a lot of sense given the weight of what they're dealing with.
Absolutely.
Reading through all of this, one question that keeps coming to mind for me is the POSH Act only for women employees?
That's a really good question, and it kind of gets to like a nuanced part of the act.
Okay.
So you're right. In its current form, it really focuses on protecting women.
Mm-hmm.
However, that doesn't mean that if someone else experiences harassment, they aren't protected.
Got it. So it's not like if you're not a woman, you're just out of luck.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
It's just that the way it's written now, that's the focus.
Specifically talking about that.
Exactly. But the POSH Act, it kind of works within this bigger framework of other laws and company policies, too.
Right, because every company probably has their own
Exactly.
HR stuff, too.
So, a lot of organizations will have a separate policy on harassment or sexual assault. That covers everyone.
Got it. So it's kind of like a wider net.
Wider net, exactly.
Yeah, it's
And then, of course, there's always the option of if those things aren't applicable for some reason or someone wants to pursue legal action.
right. It's not like this is the only thing that exists.
Exactly. There are India's laws.
Right.
People can, regardless of gender, they can pursue legal recourse
Mm-hmm.
under laws related to assault or criminal intimidation, stuff like that.
So there are other avenues.
There are other avenues, exactly. So it
Other-
doesn't mean there's no protection.
Right. It's not a free-for-all just because it's not specifically mentioned.
Exactly.
Okay. Got it. That's good to know.
Yeah, it's more nuanced than that.
Yeah. It sounds like it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So it kind of seems like even with specific laws like this, like the POSH Act,
Mm-hmm.
creating a safe and respectful workplace, it's a much bigger conversation
Oh, absolutely.
than just one law
It's 100% about the culture. Right.
of the workplace.
Yes.
It's about, does everyone feel safe? Do they feel respected? Do they feel empowered to speak up?
Right. And you can't legislate that. Right.
Exactly.
Like you can have a law that says, don't do this, but
Can't force people to, be kind and respectful to each other.
right. Exactly.
Unfortunately.
So it's really about fostering that environment somehow.
It really is. It's about creating that culture.
Okay.
And I think, speaking of that,
Yeah.
one of the things the POSH Act does do, it mandates that organizations have these training programs.
Okay. So there is an element of that,
There is.
of trying to change the culture,
Yes. And they have to be regular for all employees,
not just the people on the committee.
not just the ICC, everyone.
Interesting.
So it's not enough to just have the policy in a drawer somewhere.
Right. Like, oh, yeah, we have that.
Exactly. Everyone needs to know.
Interesting.
And these trainings, they're supposed to cover everything.
Like what kind of stuff? Like what is sexual harassment?
Okay.
How do you file a complaint?
Got it.
What's the company policy? What can you expect during an investigation?
Right.
So it's really about driving home that message that we do not tolerate this.
Yes. This is serious. This is our policy. We take it seriously.
100%.
Got it.
And, hopefully they're not just boring legal explanations, right?
Right. Because that's the thing. You can give someone a whole bunch of legal jargon,
Right. Exactly.
but if it doesn't actually resonate.
It goes in one ear and out the other.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly. So I imagine these trainings are probably most effective when they kind of go beyond that.
Yes. And really dig into things like, what if you see something happening?
Right. Like bystander intervention.
Yes, exactly.
What is your responsibility if you see something?
Because it's everyone's responsibility
Right.
to create that culture of respect.
It really is. It takes a village.
Exactly.
It does. That's a good point.
Yeah, so it's about understanding that everyone deserves to feel safe and respected.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, hearing you talk about this, it really does. It paints this bigger picture.
Yeah.
The POSH Act is obviously a huge step in the right direction,
Huge.
but it really just shows how complex this whole thing is.
It's so complex.
You know what I mean? It's not just as simple as check these boxes and you're good to go.
It's not a checklist.
Exactly. It's not just a checklist. It really is about changing behaviors and mindsets.
And I think what's often overlooked is how much of an impact all of this has on individuals,
Oh, absolutely.
on their careers,
For sure.
on their mental well-being.
100%. Going through something like that, it's got to be incredibly difficult
Incredibly difficult.
to deal with.
Yeah, so we can't just focus on the legal
Yeah.
framework.
Right.
We have to think about the human element of it all.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about, all the people who've been pushing for these changes for years.
Yeah.
All the people whose voices may not have been heard.
Right.
This is their victory too.
Absolutely. Yeah. This act, it's a testament to speaking up.
Hmm.
It's a testament to demanding change.
Yeah.
And I think it's also a reminder that, we've come a long way, but we're not done.
There's still work to be done.
Always work to be done.
Always work to be done. That's a good point.
Yeah.
I'm curious, though, like, let's say, someone's listening to this.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, I've experienced something. I'm trying to decide, do I file a formal complaint?
Right.
Like, what advice would you give them? What are the things that they should be thinking about?
Oh, man, that's a tough one because there's no easy answer, right?
Right.
It's so personal. It depends on their specific situation,
Yeah.
the severity of what happened,
Mm.
their support systems.
Right.
But if I had to give some general advice,
Yeah.
I'd say, first of all, know your rights,
Okay, good advice.
understand the company policy,
Oh.
understand the legal framework,
Gotta.
document everything.
Very important.
And most importantly, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yes. Oh, my gosh, because it can feel even with these things in place, it can feel very daunting.
Absolutely.
Come forward,
It can be very isolating.
Yeah. And so I think knowing that you've got support.
So important. Yeah. And that's when those external resources we were talking about, they can really, really make a difference. Like, are there support groups,
Right.
legal aid organizations, even just like friends and family you can lean on,
Yeah, your personal network, for sure.
Because it can be so isolating to go through something like that.
Absolutely.
And no one should have to go through it alone.
No, absolutely not. And I think it really strikes me that this isn't just a legal issue. This is about creating a culture of support,
Yes.
of believing the people who do come forward and making sure that they're not penalized for speaking out.
It's all about that cultural shift. And, I think that's where the real legacy of the POSH Act will be felt, down the line. Because it's not just about punishing the people who do these things.
Right.
It's about changing how we think about it, changing the mindset,
Yeah.
and creating workplaces where everyone just, knows.
Feels safe, feels respected.
Exactly. Feels safe, feels respected, feels empowered.
Yes. And I think, that's a goal worth striving for sure.
Worth striving for.
Well, this has been incredible. This deep dive, we've gone from unpacking, the legal framework to really getting into the cultural implications.
It's a deep dive, for sure, of all of this. So yeah, we saw that it's not just these rules on paper, but it sparks conversations. It sparks change.
Yeah.
And hopefully it'll spark a future where everyone can, go to work without fear of harassment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we all want at the end of the day, right? So on that note, I want to thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us.
Thank you for having me.
This was fantastic.
Appreciate it.
And for everyone listening, if you or someone needs support, regarding workplace harassment or anything like that, we've included some really helpful resources in the show notes, so be sure to check those out.